Welcome, fellow armchair generals, history buffs, and wargamers. I guess that's also armchair generals. For a talk on warfare and politics and wargaming and whatnot. And I'm sort of just trying a new format for this game when I go on. And this isn't a rant. I'm not ranting about anything, but a long sort of a monologue, I guess, because I'm not interacting with you, other than maybe in my head. Trying to break them out from gameplay episodes. So if you like the gameplay only, watch the gameplay episodes. If you want these talks, you can watch these, maybe only, because you're not caring just what's happening in the particular game, whether it's world, because this doesn't matter ultimately about World War One. This game, it doesn't. This is just going to illustrate an idea here, and I'm going to talk about. And so so if you never want to play this game, you still may be interested in this episode. Okay, now. Last episode, I was starting to talk, what would I do? And we can see that they've already, we can see that they've already moved much of, let's just see, let's bomb over here. Hopefully we'll have interceptors and not get shot up too badly from our sort of bombing reconnaissance. Yeah, one factor. If you've not been following this series, there had been a huge amount of artillery up here that I was hoping to cut off by getting to the coast here before they moved it. I think I pushed too hard here. These three hexes, again, this game doesn't really matter, like I'm saying, just illustrate it. I kept unoccupied and they had artillery back here, and they may have just realized that their artillery is just too near the front line. And so they moved it out, as well as a lot of it, I think, is shown up down here. I'm breaking through here. And so I do believe the game's parameters, the Belgian units have to show up in Belgium. That's the last little bit. So they keep showing up sort of stupidly here and getting killed. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, little things I could do to correct that. But let's not make it so stupid. What they should do at this point is evacuate all, and to hell with the Belgians, and come back sort of Aberville to the coast, defend here, the rail line along to Amiens, down to here, and then sort of to here, making sure you have a huge amount of units sitting in and around Paris to make sure that Paris doesn't fall. None of these sort of national objective Paris even thinks of falling. So yes, try to reinforce, create a line out here if you can, but even if whether that works or not, and you may even doom it to fail, it would be better to make sure that you are garrisoning the hell out of Paris and fall back all of these units, in which they have, you've noticed they have fallen back. So there was units here, fall back to like here and Marais Saint Grand, use that swamp, and down here to the retreat back here, use these sort of forests and hold here. And as I was saying that, that may not seem politically feasible, giving up the Belgians, giving up so much territory without fighting for it. That may collapse the French national morale. But if they're marching into Paris, that's going to collapse the French national morale even greater. Which got me to think, and I want to, Bill and Herbert, the two main creators, both of this DLC and of Strategic Command, I want to congratulate them on taking these things into account, things like their national morale. Germany's is going up, that we're now, I think, within 8 hexes as one of these objectives down here. So our units that are just hanging back along the line are hearing reports of how close we are, so their national morale is going up. Presumably the French is going down. The British are like, hey, whatever. But and more morale based on winning and losing particular units, I presume. That at its core, warfare is a political activity. We wargamers often look at men, guns, and how brilliant your general is, and that type of thing. And it can be the numbers of men or the quality of men, and some of that can come into, say, morale, the morale of the troops in battle when you roll the dice and what their morale ratings are. But when you're looking at a tactical perspective, that's largely true and largely correct. The morale for a particular unit may go up or down because of conditions on the battlefield and their losses and whatnot, but it's not a political morale other than what is already set at the beginning of the battle. When you're talking about a strategic game, and although this is not a grand strategy, in that this is just the Western Front, we have the Italian front, the Ottoman fronts, what's happening on the east. Now, historically, the Ludendorff offensive can only happen is because the war in the east is over, functionally. So Germany was able to do that. So it's had a major victory already to allow this to happen. And I got to sort of thinking about all this. I know a lot of stuff's going through my head when I was sort of getting ready for this, playing talk, is the American Civil War, as we often look at it. Of course, the North's going to win. They've got more men, more industry, rail lines. If you look at rail lines, which is really nice that they have rail lines in this game, that they're able to shift units around. Oh, man. And I've played... I'm not playing any, and several viewers, friends have have pushed me to try to play some of the Civil War games out there, because America does have an insurgency. By any effing definition, there is an insurgency going on by BLM and Antifa. I don't care. You want to say, oh, BLM, what do you... No, they are a Marxist insurgency organization. That is different than saying, oh, Black Lives, there's Black Lives Matter as a movement is a Marxist insurgency. Period. Simple. You can think Marxist insurgencies are good ideas or not, but that's what they are. This is not whether black lives, people's lives matter. Oh, yes, all lives matter. That's all lives matter. But BLM is a Marxist insurgency organization. All their leaders are communists, and they've said it. I'm not calling them that. They're self-identified as communists. Maybe they're really capitalists that are just scamming people. That could be, but they say they're communists. So America is currently under an insurgency that is being racially motivated. So I don't want to, after all, doing so much stuff on the Nazis, that's a sensitive enough topic, obviously. I don't want to step into another minefield on top of it right now. So I'm staying away from the American Civil Wars, playing any games and talking a lot about it. But you can look at, the North's rail and river system, if you're playing a war game correctly and have that. And the South's rather decent river system, and including the number of riverboats on the rivers, but very minimal rails in compared to the North. The amount of rails, the amount of rolling stock. Of course, the North's going to win. But there were several key moments when the Confederacy could have won. Not conquered the North, but secured its independence from the North. Because warfare is a political act. And so what happens, I'll tell you what, one thing with this playthrough that I'm doing here now, I'm worried about is just having France collapse, because I want to conquer Paris. I want the French to fight for Paris. I want to conquer Paris. I want to fight my way to the coast. I want to have those challenges and win, and not just, oh, France gave up, war's over, you've won. That's sort of boring. Now, I I also, oh, how do I put this? We've seen a lot of my rinse and repeat. Now, I understand some of this here, but a lot of times this unit that's been appearing here has not been Belgian. I think that these two units showing up here are reinforcement placements, and I have to think they come like within 1 hex of Newport. Of course, you could have moved him to some other position and have them appear in these two, or both of these units, in entrenched positions here. They'll try to hold out as long as they can. That could be a thing, of course, as opposed to just sticking it there. But a lot of the rinse and repeat of having them show up, I don't know if we have any good show up in places here because they're all retreating right now, in places filling stupid non-gaps, like filling like this position or some theoretical thing that I've been able to just bleed them white on. That's sort of disappointing because you want to have a proper opponent. And so I want to have the French be able and willing to fight and not just have opponents that are idiots or whatever. So yeah, I want to fight. Now, of course, I want to bash my way into Paris rapidly, of course, but I want them to at least attempt to be smart about it. And yeah, look at all that MPP. It's a ridiculous amount, of course. I don't know if France is what theirs looks like right now, and whether they have a lot of units that are just going to be, placed out here rapidly. So governments need to make choices in warfare. What to hold, what to give up. And a lot of times they make bad ones. Because, how do I put this? I guess their expectations. Yeah, their expectations of either what and I would almost use the term voter, but the populace expects from the government, and whether, is it politically acceptable to, abandon Calais and Dunkirk, or no, we must fight for it, or we're going to, there are going to be riots in Paris. Well, there might be riots in Paris, but what's going to happen when you still lose Calais and Dunkirk, and that you fought it? Well, at least we fought over it. Yeah, but you've lost all of those men, even if they're not all dead. They're in prison camps, and you've lost all that equipment, and you didn't achieve anything other than fighting for it. Now, yes, there is the idea that if you fight hard enough, that you make, it becomes a pyrrhic victory. That it's, yeah, you've won, but the cost to the enemy's almost as destroyed as, or you've lost, but the enemy has won, but they're almost as the units left are in bad shape as the defeated units. So yes, there is that. And if those two conditions, one, whatever forces that yours survives that are retreated out, and the enemy's forces that were fighting there are so badly handled that those can be cause victory, well, then it might be worth it. But I guess, and I really wish I had a mind that I could quote things well and I've read Sun Tzu through at least translations of him, shall we say, multiple times in my life, but then even try to, know not yourself and not the enemy, you will lose always, or, that know yourself but not the enemy. I'm badly paraphrasing here. You have a chance or whatever. Know yourself and know your enemy. do not fear the outcome of 1,000 battles. Now, of course, what he's, obviously looking at is, things that are competitive. And you can even look at something like Vietnam, the Vietnam War, if you will, and they're fighting the USA. Obviously, Vietnam wasn't. I mean, they were smart not to, but they used. Vietnam did attack America directly, but they used proxy forces, American college students, to plant bombs. The Weather Underground. Oh, the Weather Underground, of course, is running in the current modern Democratic Party. But hey, yeah. So yeah. And they're still fighting. Their proxy forces are still fighting, and Vietnam is like going, no, Trump's good. We want Trump. He wants to stop China, and we want to stop China. And they're probably not even realizing. I wonder if the current Vietnamese government is not realizing their proxy forces. And I'm not saying it was NVA, North Vietnamese agents that came to America. That no, probably they were Soviet. They definitely, and through proxy set up various communist things. Trust me, and it's not even necessarily there were any Soviet agents directly, because they provided, back in the 60s and the 70s, the Soviet Union provided money and other resources to various think tank and activist organizations that promoted communist radicalism of various types. And those college students in Europe and in America, they're still around, and they're in positions of power here in America. And that could be like a university professor or a university president or whatever. They are here, and they are still around, and they're still being active. And so it may not be the university professor or the university president ever met with a Soviet agent, or the people that sort of indoctrinated them, they ever met. It's through various cutouts and proxies. And I know I may be sounding like some weird conspiracy theorist, but trust me, it's quite real and true, that war is still being fought, the Cold War, if you will, and their proxy forces even now. Whether the current Russian government thinks of them as just disrupting America so it's good, or whether it's they don't care anymore because they're no longer trying to send communism around the world, but the blowback is still happening. And so, know yourself and know your enemy. Vietnam knew, and Nguyen, however you pronounce, Giap, the main primary general of North Vietnam, very good general, was a Sun Tzu devotee, I understand as well. He knew it well, and he knew himself and he knew his enemy. And I think because of various political things, and I think because he thought at the battlefield, partially because of looking at Dien Bien Phu when he was fighting the French, he thinks he can win conventional battles like the Tet Offensive, and particularly things like the sort of follow off from all of that, the Siege of Khe Sanh, where he really loses the Tet Offensive, but he does win the home front of America. And so he knows that. They know, trying to bleed America white in the battlefield, that the real battlefield for the Vietnam War that really brought America down was the American home front. It was not, because we were winning on multiple levels. The U.S. was winning in Vietnam. I know there's a lot of revisionist thinkers running around now, and I would very much say that Westmoreland was playing checkers and Giap was playing chess. And that partly comes into the idea of the American home front. But still, even with that, the U.S. was continually winning on the battlefield, and including things like the air war. I know we had a lot of airplanes shot down, and all of our bombings didn't make them come in, but again, it's within the context of the Cold War. They clearly would have lost had there not been both Soviet and Chinese massive amounts of support into North Vietnam. South Vietnam could not have sustained the effort. So, know yourself and know your enemy. Do not fear the outcome. And that is an important element. So, if you're going to fight over a lost cause of defending, I don't mean like lost cause of the Confederacy or of your particular nation. I mean, as in, like, yeah, we're going to keep artillery and infantry, and we're going to hold Calais, and we're going to hold Dunkirk, and we're going to fight. So it looks like they've given up Dunkirk, and I don't know if they're just couldn't have moved more units out if they don't, because they have a stupid amount of the MPP. They should have been able to get all this stuff out of here if they really wanted to get out. But fight over these units. And yes, if you're going, yeah, well, we're tying up all of these forces here that would be crushing us down here if they were freed up. And if we can, stay in our trenches and make them attack us and we bleed them white, which has been the opposite. We've been bleeding them white. Bleed them white, we've won. Okay, if you know yourself and you know your enemy and you know how to do that, great. But if you're just stupidly fighting for these positions because of politics, then it's, a bad decision. I'm thinking of things like Poland looking at its 1939 industry and population. And I don't know how much was just because they took over former German imperial industry elements and how much the natural population was already sort of there. So I know lots and lots of Germans had fled. I mean, tens of thousands of Germans had fled either in the immediate aftermath of World War I and the changing of the borders, or just gradually as things became more and more Polish, and the German farmer, business owner, worker just finally goes, yeah, I'm selling my property, selling up, I'm moving to Germany, kind of thing like that. And whether the Poles were moving into the West when people were leaving or not, whether that was the case, or the Poles particularly wanted to put their industry in the West because they were more afraid of the East and the Bolsheviks at the time, in the 20s. Because before 1933, not that Poland didn't have any theoretical fears of Germany, being resurgent at some point. I'm absolutely sure they did, even before the Nazis were even on anybody's radar, just because revanchism and we want our old borders back. They realize that, of course, absolutely they do. And you could even, you can see, everyone wants to pretend that the left wing is, they're the good people. They just want peace and best and fairness. No, you can find a lot of left-wing governments that want their territories back. And so even if there was a socialist revolution, or particularly maybe if there was a considerable socialist revolution in Germany, which the Poles wanted to really, there was socialist elements in Poland, but most of the Poles wanted nothing to do with socialism or communism. And so, but if Germany goes socialist or communist, well, now Poland's between two Bolshevik countries, or if it's just socialism, a Bolshevik-friendly country and a Bolshevik country. So, they definitely were always worried about Germany, but maybe they were more worried about the Soviet Union. And so they put it there. So I don't know quite why the industry and the population was specifically in those locations, but they felt they needed to defend Western Poland and have units in Western Poland instead of using the natural rivers. I love making these talks with Hearts of Iron because I got the map and I can show you all the stuff. But so you have, you could do the sort of have the armies, the fortifications built around the rivers and the central area of Poland to whether, if you're attacked from the east or the west. Now, if you're truly, of course, if you're attacked from the east and the west, you're screwed. You're just screwed. Nothing you can, you're not going to win that. And not even if you know yourself and know your enemy and try to do a Vietnam type, we're going to do guerrilla warfare insurgent. It ain't going to work. There's not enough geography, and both sides are ruthless enough to willing to kill millions of you, because trust me, it's not just the Germans willing to kill millions of Poles, so were the Soviets. Now the Soviets, well, they're quite willing to shoot large batches. I mean, hundreds of thousands if need be, but they definitely killed thousands, like in the Katyn forest massacre. Quite willing to do that, or also quite willing to just randomly or organize, or in an organized way, show up on the streets, round up people, put them in boxcars and take them off to gulags to work them to death. So it's not a good guy versus bad guy, or even in my opinion, bad guy and worse guy. They're just Stalin and Hitler, and either way, Poland's screwed. I mean, they have the ability to erase Poland. You're done. So taking that analysis, politics, and then looking at Czechoslovakia and their decision not to fight, first over Sudetenland, because they, and again, Poland's part of the problem with the Sudetenland. Poland wants a little bit of, and there's several different, Kolais, and also other sort of spellings with CH, so I don't know how hard or soft, depending if you're Polish, Czech, or German, however you want to say the thing, and whether it's language difference or just national differences of calling the thing different things. I don't know. They wanted basically, I don't know, in this scale, somewhere between a 2 and 4 hex bit of Czechoslovakia. So they were like, yeah, hey, we want that too. While Germany's getting Sudetenland, there's Poles living there. We want that bit of territory. Instead of like, we're standing in solidarity with you over it, we're ready to go to war if they invade, kind of thing. No, they wanted their piece of Czechoslovakia too. Hungary wanted their piece of mostly Slovakia. Slovakia sort of wanted out as well. Hungary and maybe Poland wanting a little bit, wanting to get some of the mountain region. I'm blanking on the name. The tail end of old Czechoslovakia that modern Czechoslovakia doesn't have. Carpathians, that's it. The Carpathians. So everybody was out for bits and pieces of Czechoslovakia. And their Western allies, France and Britain, gave up on them, so they decide not to fight. And then they're still trying to arm up. I don't know why. They're developing fighters. Maybe it's just inertia, or momentum is already, maybe the opposite of inertia. Momentum is already going on all these projects before the collapse, and they just continue. So they develop new, better tanks, and they develop a fighter that is, I forget its name, that according to the German analysis, this is the German analysis of the Czech fighter, it is not enough of a improvement over the 109, because the Focke-Wulf 190 didn't exist yet. It is not enough of an improvement over the 109 to justify two different production lines going on. So the Czechs had made the prototype. They were getting ready to, or staging up its mass production, and the Germans take over and they evaluate, fly the aircraft around and go, yeah, this is better than our aircraft. Now, of course, the 109 over time gets better. I don't even know if the Emil was out, the E model yet was out on the 109 at that date. But it's constantly getting better, and I'm sure the 109 gets better than what the Czech one was at that point. But what could the Czech one have developed into it? But it's not enough better for us to justify it. And since they didn't have a lot of them sitting around on the air bases, and they didn't have a lot of them, or they didn't have a production line already up and running to go, yeah, we just keep it going. They didn't push hard on it. So you have the Czech model of just going, yeah, we give up. Now, what should Poland have done? Basically, there's one relatively friendly nation on the Polish borders that was something. But even Lithuania is enough of a friendly sort of nation. What should Poland have done? Have plans. One, set up sort of a fortress central Poland, so that, hey, if Soviet Union invades, okay, they've got a lot of territory to sort of give up on, and sort of riverbanks and a good place to fight, and sort of rely upon German borders to the north and the south to sort of, unless Germany is, whether a friendly Germany is helping them out, or just the Soviet Union not willing to actually fight the Soviets. I mean, actually, the Soviet Union not actually willing to fight the Germans, sorry. So they're not going to push there, so they can use that as sort of, flanks on their borders, if you will, and sort of hold there as best they can, or vice versa. The flanks aren't really a thing, so already flanked by the Germans, and hold out as long as they can in their central part against a German only. But if, and especially once they hear the Molotov Pact, then even though it's not publicized what's going to happen over Poland, they realize what's happening. What should you do? Leave. Evacuate. And they do. They do. Not enough. They didn't have enough plans. They had plans for the Navy to get out. That's why all three of the submarines and a couple of the destroyers, the three of the destroyers, get out of the Baltic and get to Britain. One of I think the submarines survived the war. I think one of the destroyers, is still flying they may also fly British flags, but still flying the Polish flag, and manned and captained by Polish crews, but fighting in as part of the Royal Navy, as it were, is lost off of Norway during the actions of the German invasion of Norway. So yeah. So they effectively get out and are useful. But they should have set up once, and they only had weeks, but pre-set up the idea of evacuate as much personnel as they could out of Poland. Because even if you got enough people and just sort of go, oh, no, these aren't troops, these are Polish tourists streaming into Lithuania. Lithuania might not like it, but maybe they can get out via, before the Soviets come in, via Sweden and whatnot, and because it takes a while for them to take Norway to places like Britain and France, or as they did stand up two divisions of mostly people that make it out, though also people living in exile, or just, living overseas, if you will, as we would say it, though, but living in France or whatever. Volunteer and join up for two Polish divisions, but they could have easily done more and get out through Romania. And so do a sort of fighting withdrawal, actually have more of a plan of a fighting withdrawal down to Romania and get out. And similarly, which I don't think happens much, Czechoslovakia could have tried to do something like that to Poland. Poland, of course, had stabbed them in the back, but still, by that point, Poland is starting to wake up that, yeah, we should have allied with Czechoslovakia against Germany. But yeah, so warfare, and so, okay, back to and I know this has gone on probably too long, but wargamers, wargamers need to take, and people who take into account and want to talk about history and war game history, political objectives are critical to what's going on here. And so what is defeat and what is victory? It comes down to politics. Because I'll tell you what, taking Paris doesn't have to defeat France, doesn't have to mean that France is defeated. But taking Paris can mean France is defeated and it's done for. Now, those are two contradictory statements, obviously. And so, let's say there's a real world exploit. Somehow Germany builds enough Zeppelins. They build 100 Zeppelins, and they put a bunch of paratroopers on Zeppelins, and we're talking World War I era, and they fly into Paris and then all parachute out of the Zeppelins at low altitude or whatever, but outside of any sort of anti-aircraft gun, and they take Paris, yay! Real world, as opposed to just some sort of exploit in Hearts of Iron or something. You land paratroopers on Paris and all the French surrender, or their national morale goes on. Well, if the whole army is still sort of in existence and there's still real fight going on, well, yeah, that's stupid. Of course, they're not going to. I mean, it might hurt morale. It may be a political setback, but they're not just going to collapse because Paris fell. But if the army, whether it's being handled smartly or stupidly, is incapable of stopping the Germans from taking Paris, then everything's collapsed, because they're not going to stop them on the next town and the next city and the next city. And so it needs to be evaluated. Was it a collapse in a particular sector? Well, let's just say you brought in the green American troops and you put them on this sector here, and they collapse, and let's just again say that there's enough railways and whatever, and the Germans just stream through and march in and take Paris. But the great bulk of the French army is still sitting all around, and it may take a year or two, because let's just say they were able to entrench and hold out, and they need to build, and maybe all the industry in and around Paris or whatever is destroyed, wrecked, so the French tanks need to be made. But they know they're making tanks in America, and they're going to get over here, and they're going to be able to retake it. And it's going to take a couple of years, but they're going to be able to defeat the Germans. Yeah, I think you can hold out. So whether it's like a French local collapse because you have an idiot general or whatever, or a brilliant German general in that sector, but the rest of the army is still relatively intact, and you take Paris, that's bad. Sort of like, again, get back to the start of this. I know it's sort of gone off the rails a bit, but if you decide to evacuate up here because you can't hold it, that may cause serious upset politically. But if you can demonstrate as a political action, as a military action, by evacuating up here, you're able to, let's say, come back in here and cut off the big German push in here and create a pocket and kill all the the units and capture the soldiers and reestablish a new front line here, and then you go, well, that will work because it's lesser of losing here and here. Trying to hold everything holds nothing, and so you make your choices. And so that kind of thing, warfare is a political act. Americans particularly often look at process. You talk to, and some of it might just be sort of propaganda, some of it, and that they will want to give you a lot of it, but trust me, a lot of the people, at least until this recent insurgency and even then some of the people that are sort of high up, they believe so much in process that if just every country in the world were to adopt the U.S. Constitution, because it's such a brilliant Constitution, and it's a very good Constitution, if they were just to adopt that Constitution, everyone would have good governance. Sort of like, yeah, just bring democracy to Iraq. And the people of Iraq, enough of them win the vote that they're going to elect me and I'll exterminate these other people. And oh yeah, hey, that's great. We want to exterminate those other people. They have this idea that process and democracy and whatever is just going to get a result. That's the proper result, whatever that is. And it's good for mankind. So they want to spread democracy around the world. And democracy in America now, and, people are, if you re-elect Trump, democracy is going to die. Well, so far, Trump has not done anything that's been unconstitutional. And when he was impeached, it wasn't for, what? Tell me what Trump was impeached for. What crime? You can't without Googling it. And then if you Google it, you'll find it was for being Trump. He's Orange Man bad. He hasn't done anything that's against the Constitution. And maybe, if you go under some of these people's definitions, and I don't mean that, I'm not trying to litigate the current thing, is maybe most Americans who vote, it isn't a majority that vote, but if you actually look at it, it's often less than, well, some people are just, under the age to vote, but most of them are, like 40% of the Americans aren't even registered to vote, that could vote. And even those that registered to vote, many often don't vote. But of those that vote, maybe there will be more people vote against Trump than for Trump. In a state like California, 80% of the voters may vote against Trump. And 51% of the voters in 10 other states will vote for Trump. And so that means so many people will vote against Trump. But because of our Constitution, Trump will win the election, because you got to win the states. And if you overwhelmingly win one state like California, but you just barely lose in another state, say like Nevada, it's winner take all in each of these states. And the states themselves, they could change it to where it's proportioned out, electors proportioned out, but they don't want to do it because they want to have each state has its own power. And so, yeah, democratically, Trump may win the election on a minority vote, fewer votes than the other side. But that's still the Constitution. So, yeah, democracy, we value the Constitution in America more than we value majority rule. So, but even there, the idea is it the process or is it the people? If you give the American Constitution, there's like all kinds of rights that people had in the Soviet Union under their Constitution. And there's all kinds of rights that people have in current day China under the, Communist Party of China, the CCP, that rights that they have under their Constitution that the government completely ignores, like the right of freedom of speech or whatever. And that they in practice they don't have them. The government just locks people up. Just because the Constitution of a nation says something, whether it's corruption for power or corruption for money, or they just never really meant it because it's the world socialist movement or the world righteous religious movement, or for the environment, or for whatever the cause is, that may be truly selfless in their eyes. It's not for personal power, and it's not for, because they would be willing to step down from office just to have their cause win. And it's maybe not for money because they would be, not going to lose everything, but willing to, not be rich and step down. So it's not always about personal corruption, but maybe ideological corruption or whatever you want to say. That just because they have this framework, people don't necessarily support it or go along with it. And a good example would be, historically, the Weimar government. The communists didn't like the Weimar Constitution. The right wing didn't like the Weimar Constitution. The National Socialists that have aspects of the right and the left, I'm still vacillating on whether they're right wing or left wing. But the National Socialists, or say it another way, the German Socialists, party of Hitler, didn't like the Weimar Constitution. I don't know about the SDP, the Socialist Party of Germany. But they're sort of international. They're German international socialists or whatever. I don't know if they like the Weimar Constitution. Nobody, or almost nobody really likes the Weimar Constitution, so nobody values it in Germany as a thing unto itself. It doesn't have value to the German people. There are other things that, whether it's, social justice, rights for the worker, pay, good living standards for the worker, which of course, you may think I'm talking about communism, but that's also National Socialism in Germany at the time. Or whether it's nationalism, the right wing, whether it's some wanting the Kaiser back, some not wanting so much having the Kaiser back because they realize the old Kaiser and the petty kings like the King of Bavaria and the whatever is just a stupid system, but wanting a rationalized nationalist system in Germany. Whatever your viewpoint, nobody liked that constitution. So just because you have something doesn't mean it's going to work right. And this is why I'm a culturalist. I think Anglo countries work so well, not because of their constitution or their laws. It's because of I know I've gotten way off topic here. Because of their culture. And because of their culture, they develop things like the U.S. Constitution. So it's culture first, then constitution. Unfortunately, either countries look around at constitutions and go, hey, yeah, America seems to be working good. If we just had their constitution, it would be great, without changing their culture. So that doesn't really end up working. Or other people like America, well, just have this constitution, it'll be great. They go, well, okay, your armies are all over our country. Okay, yeah, we don't want to be shot at anymore. We'll take your constitution. And then they go on to be whatever their culture sort of pushes them to be. Doesn't really matter what the political form that's in power matters. So this does get back to people and personalities. And that is something that I would say is largely lost in a game. I mean, like if Bill and Herbert have done a very good job with some of the national morale, and certain goals and objectives, but is often lost here in that we look at how many units can we purchase, that kind of thing, how many, whatnot. So, oh man, this really gotten off my original intention of looking at warfare, politics, and how they're modeled in war games. That was my starting and probably part of the title. And why I really like particularly Hearts of Iron 3, though Hearts of Iron 4 does this as well, and does this why, thank God, Hearts of Iron 4, Hearts of Iron 3 has enough wacky outcomes. Now modded it gets better, but has enough wacky outcomes. Hearts of Iron 4 just goes completely into Looneyville, and why I know a lot of players of like Strategic Command World War II and Warplan don't like it, because it does go into Looneyville. But the idea that your political leadership and party matter in those games, I think is a critical thing when we're talking about a grand strategy game. And so Paradox, so far, to the best of everything I know, is coming the closest to the best grand strategy war games, even with the lunacy of Hearts of Iron 4. Hearts of Iron 4 could be, while keeping the basic game structure format, could be redone in a way that gets rid of most of the lunacy. Just because of AIs and humans, you can always trust to have a little bit of lunacy here. But so, yeah, they do it the best. And having the political figures and the political parties, because I'm thinking of World War II and the collapse of the 25th Republic or whatever it was. I think it was the Third Republic, but who knows? Or was it the Second Republic? I don't know. The collapse of the Republic, because the Republic collapses when they put Pétain in charge. He does not. It is not a military coup. I mean, he's a retired general. It is not a right wing or some sort of coup. No, the Republic has collapsed, and the political leaders of the Republic establish a new government that is not in any way, shape, or form democratically elected, and is not under their constitutional government, as far as I understand, unless there was some provision. Hey, if things don't work out, we just put a national leading figure as our dictator. I mean, that may be in the Constitution of France. I don't know, of whatever republic, but so their political structure collapses, and you set up the Pétain government that eventually becomes the Vichy government, but it's not at first. It's can't even get over there. It's down on the west coast of France. So that element clearly shows that whole sort of activity shows how politics and war coincides. Paris falls because the military realizes that it can't defend Paris and win. Know yourself and know your enemy. I think at that point they make the right decision. And as I said before, the French are willing to turn Paris into a battleground. It's not like, the city of art treasures and beautiful architecture, we're not willing to fight. Look at the Franco-Prussian War. They're willing to turn it into the battleground. And I think in World War I or World War II, they would have been willing to turn it into the battleground if they thought it was a useful battlefield. Meaning if they could, turn it into a, besieged city while the 5th and 10th mechanized armies were fully stood up and ready for massive counterattack, pure pincer movements that are going to surround the German armies that are just sitting there and cut them off and destroy them and whatever. I think they would have done it. I don't have a doubt in my bones that if they, if the leadership and all the people really thought they could do it and turn the tide back, they would have done it. But they realized, nope, they're not going to defend it. So, there's military units. I don't know if they'd already declared Paris an open city, but they were moving through, at least greater Paris and fleeing south as military units, not just as rabble of men, leaving. And attempting to fight, trying to create a rational defensive position at some point. But they're never able to harden that, defensive line and hold on. We can see here basically because of bad AI, I would say. We see British and Americans. Yes, the French are down here, but we're seeing some American artillery, American here. British, I've bled the, they're even using American units, command units, basically as holding the line, it looks like there. Basically because I bled them white because of bad AI decisions. And so, if there was a massive French army that was, here getting ready to harden the line against our push, they just need turns to entrench and increase their morale, from initial deployment. And sort of, then you're able to fight. But if you've collapsed, the Americans and the British are not going to be able to save France. And so it's time to change governments. It's time to settle for what you can, whether we're talking 1940 or 1918. And that gets me back to the American Civil War. There was a real possibility of Lincoln not winning re-election. I think if Lincoln does not win re-election in 1864, I think the Confederacy is not victorious as in marching into Washington, D.C. and I don't know what happens to the U.S. Capitol because it's right on the border there. And I don't know that the quote-unquote border states that were slave states joined the Confederacy. But because you still have a very big Union army sitting around there. They probably end up moving the capital in the long run. But I could readily see the idea that the new president is, because of the political mandate, we don't want to die for either the slaves or we don't want to die for forcing these other states to be part of our union. However you want to look at that, and there's both sentiments going on. That there very well could be, because we see manpower and industry in the North is going to defeat the South. They're going to always be able to build more ships. Even though the Confederates make some really nice ironclads, they're normally just one in a major port. They can sally out and bash up the fleet that's outside of them, maybe, or enough to hang around in the port along with the defensive guns of the port to keep a major naval invasion from happening from that port. But that isn't defeating the Navy. That's maybe winning a localized battle. But if not the next day, the next month, there's another whole new Navy sitting out off, another fleet, not a whole new Navy, but another fleet sitting off your coast, blockading them. There is no way for the Confederacy, because even if the Confederacy come up with some clever, the Hunley, the submarine, it might mysteriously blow up a couple of vessels and maybe relieve a blockade somewhere to allow some blockade runners in and out, save the port from a naval invasion or something. But that isn't going to, because you just actively sail around. The Hunley can't catch a sailing or steaming vessel. It can only really get stuff that's sort of at anchor or just sort of drifting with the current or something. It ain't going to get stuff. So the Confederacy isn't going to create some super weapon. If they come up with some clever, both sides were coming up with ironclads. But, if they came up with the ironclad, well, the North's just going to copy it. So, give time. So you might get a Confederate victory somewhere briefly, but the North will just see and copy it. So the North's always going to win militarily against the Confederacy. But whether at the First Battle of Manassas or Bull Run, however you want to call it, and had they pursued the literal panicked fleeing troops and population back to Washington, D.C., I think, though that's such an early battle, I don't know whether they would have been able to capture Lincoln and whatever that might have meant. I think they might have been able to capture some elements of the U.S. government, whether that means literally clerks, which are important people because they know how things run, And if you don't have them, the next guy who's trying to be the guy who, I don't know, manages the trains or whatever, he doesn't know the job. Or whether it's, the actual sort of higher ups, the cabinet and elected, congressmen and senators, whether you capture some of those and what that exactly means. And no, the Confederacy isn't going to threaten to kill them or anything. They'll just, imprison them for the duration of the war, just like the North would have imprisoned anybody, political leaders they captured. So whether that would have meant the, sort of the Confederacy wins because the North, the Lincoln government collapses and whatever comes in after it, whatever that means, I don't know. Because who do they capture? If you get the president, the vice president, and the speaker of the House, you've got, it always, then some other cabinet member, there's sort of a chain of succession, but yeah, politically, he or she, well, back then it was going to be he's going to be the president, but it's really the state governments at that point is going to matter. And how much is the state government of Massachusetts or Maine or Illinois, when they're sort of deciding what's going to happen, do we raise another big army? Because that was the 90-day army that, and that was sort of the reason for the battle is the 90-day army that Lincoln stood up. The enlistments were going to run out, so he pushed to take Richmond and take the capital, and that fails. And the Confederacy pushes back, had that sort of the main federal army just melted away. Are they going to, is the, whatever provisional government, whatever you want to call it, are they going to do the, get the laws passed to draft people in all the different states and stand up a large army and fight back? Or are they going to go, no, we'll sign I really think it's quite possible they would have signed a treaty, a declaration acknowledging the Confederates' independence or something. And Antietam or whatever, one of the battles that had it gone the other way, probably Lincoln would have lost the election. Probably. And the Democrat that was running against him wasn't so worried about slavery existing. Democrats, sort of democratic, if you don't understand either Americans or people around the world, the Democrat Party is the party of paternalism in America. The whole South was a paternalistic state. The economy was set up that way. The society was set up that way. You could do it without slavery. If you had a Wilberforce type movement that, remember, Wilberforce gets slavery eventually. Slavery is eventually abolished in England, and the government buys the slaves because England also recognizes life, liberty, and property. And unfortunately, people were property, and the government recognizes that. And so they go, okay, well, people are property, so we have to pay you for your property, but then we're freeing the people. Okay. Of course, that, I don't know if anybody really proposes that in the U.S. at any time. Like all the slave owners, well, we're buying all your slaves from you. And then you can hire them back to, at working wages to work on your stuff, but we'll actually buy the slaves from you. I don't know if that was ever, I don't quite honestly know if that was ever seriously proposed. And as part of the measure, of course, buying the slaves, that they're freed. Not like they're buying them and then freeing them. They're just, the act that we'll go through the process. It may take a year. So the slave is still a slave until you get a receipt for him from the government. But the government, has to buy him at whatever set prices. You can't refuse to sell them. And once the government gives you and the person gets a receipt, they're free to go. And so it may take a year, and somebody may capture and then try to resell somebody back to the government a few times. But yeah, bad things are happening. Let's clean it up with money. That would have been cheaper than the Civil War, I believe, just in money terms, and not just government budgets, but also, property destruction and reconstruction costs and all of that crap. It would have been cheaper just to buy the slaves and then free them, of course. Recognize that somebody considered them property. I'm not saying they should be, and just free them. That's what Britain did. And it was like into the 1980s or the 1990s that Britain finally paid off that debt, all of it, paid it off for buying out the slaves in the British Empire. Yeah, and you can talk about how even after that, British Empire isn't perfect, absolutely, and people are maybe forced to work, but no longer like as personal property kind of thing of somebody. Conscript, governments can conscript people, whether conscript them to work in a factory or conscript them to be a soldier. They conscript, not so much in America, but in Britain, they conscript. Basically, there is national conscription for women. There's either you get a job that's approved or you're going to be conscripted, maybe into a job, not necessarily like into the ATS or one of the other sort of women's semi-militarized, not like going to go fight, but, wearing a uniform, doing what you're told, just like, oh, well, you're being conscripted. You have to show up at this factory and do this job. Now you get to go home at night, and you're probably, yes, there is some movement of people like outside of their city or whatnot, but a lot of it is maybe local. So maybe you can still live in your home, but you don't get to be a single woman and not do something. Now, maybe if you're a mother of 2 or 3 and your presumably husband, or maybe he's died, but he's off at war, and you got to take care of your kids, that may get you out of it. I don't quite know the regulations in Britain or whatever at any one particular time. But if you're a single woman, at some point, basically, you're conscripted. Either you go find a job that will keep you from being conscripted, or we're going to conscript you most likely into a war work or some sort of maybe land girls or some sort of work. You're being conscripted. So the government we accept the government can conscript people. And so sometimes those people may be people that don't want to be part of your country, colonies, people living in other parts of the world that you colonized. But yeah, we acknowledge that. People might not want to, but even communists, they conscript people. So yeah, even the left agrees. And they only want to claim they don't when they want to use it against the right. But yeah, therefore conscripting people. So yeah, I know I didn't want to talk too much about the South, but the Democratic Party, to get back to where it was, is the paternalistic party. Now, it may not be paternalistic anymore in the sense that it is male, and it may not be a matriarchy. I know matriarchy and patriarchy, but paternalistic, matrialistic. It may not be gender based, but if you look at at every level of it, they're lockstep. They're not very divergent in political thought or within their party. You can look at like Tulsi Gabbard and how she bucked the system, and basically she's not running for re-election for her seat in Hawaii because she knows she's going to be primaried by a loyal Democrat who won't criticize the Democratic Party. They are the party of non-gender specific paternalism. They always have been. They always are. That is at the core of their being. They are the paternalistic party. The Republicans were founded as an anti-slavery liberty party. The Republicans, yes, part of some of the demographic you may not think that they are, but simply because they are a coalition, all parties sort of are, they have elements that may not seem overly liberty, more authority, but they are truly the Liberty Party in America, as opposed to the paternalistic party in America. So I don't know how we got onto that, but so yeah, this has turned into a rambling thing. But so politics in America and the Civil War, we could easily see the Confederacy creating just enough defeats, costing, whether it's money, lives, because people often talk, oh, well, you want people to die in COVID just to the costs of shutdowns. Well, the cost of shutdowns are disrupting of people's lives and costing people's lives. People are dying because of the shutdown. I'm not saying there's more than in America, I guess, 200,000 deaths that can be partially contributed to COVID. I say partially because I think they may have already had, they were already very physically, many of them had other physical problems as well, and that probably would still be alive without COVID, but it's COVID plus their other problems that killed them, and not just their other problem or just COVID. It wasn't that they were perfectly fine and healthy and then they got COVID and they died. That's the case in some, but in many of them, they had other underlying conditions. But there are many people dying in America of drug overdoses because of it, of alcohol abuse, which is a type of drug. There's a lot of not just dollars and cents, but a lot of hurt going on because of the shutdowns. So cost isn't necessarily cost in money. It's cost in lives, costs in industrial usage. Do you make guns or do you make toasters? Do you build a new railway, link from here to here without having to go all the way around to here? Do a new railway line somewhere, or do you build a bunch of tanks? Now you want to build a bunch of tanks, so you want your nation to be protected. But instead of building a bunch of tanks and having an army, you're building a bunch of tanks every month and having them destroyed, and you're building new ones. So it's not just like the dollars and cents that the taxpayers and whatever have to eventually pay for it. It's what could be alternate uses of that industrial capability, whether just for fun or for improvement of your country, your society. What the cost and disruption in people's lives. If you take away, whether you are on the home front or you are on the battlefront, you may survive, but you've lost 4 years of your life in a way. You still, and people had fun in war. And I don't mean like, oh, we like killing people. No, there's a lot of I'm thinking of like the home front in Britain. There's a lot of people that are like, working together, and the land girls out learning to farm, and it's a lot of hard work, but it's still, there's good times going on, during it. It's not like everything is terrible. But that is not what they would have chose to do if there was no war. So you get that, so it's not what they would choose to do if there's no war. So they lose 4 years, say, even if it's not 4 terrible years. You didn't spend them in the trenches or being, occupied by the Nazis in some sort of concentration camp or something terrible. That did happen, but it could just be, you're in Britain, and for 4 years of your life is consumed with the war. And then the aftermath of the war for another few years. So it's not entirely lost, but it's partially lost. And on the scale that it's happened, it's tragic. So, okay. Politics, war, and war games. Sorry, got a little off topic there. Hope it was fun. Next time we'll be back for a regular episode, and that's why I wanted to break this out, as I felt like talking about the subject. So like, subscribe, comment on any point during the thing. I always like your comments. If I don't give you long answers back, it's because I don't like to type a lot. Short answers I'm great with, but see you next time for more historical gaming.